There are various versions of Linux Mint. However, the one I found most compatible with most PCs is the Linux Mint 11 DVD 32-bit version. This main edition, right out of the box, provides full multimedia support, meaning that you can listen to MP3s, watch DVDs, and view web pages that require flash technology right after the install. There is now a Linux Mint 12 available. However, I do not recommend using it at this time because it's fairly new and still a bit buggy, and I've tried it out and I've had a few problems with it, so I'm not encouraging you to go to it at this point, but eventually I'm sure they'll work the bugs out and it'll be just fine and better than ever. You can find all the various versions of Linux Mint at www.linuxmint.com. Again, these are recommended minimum requirements for your computer. However, you can go with lesser rated specs on your computer, for example Pentium 3, and try 256 megs of RAM. However, the computer will run slower and less efficient and have difficulty with playing video, things of that nature. And again, you won't know the result until you try it, but generally things will run slower and you may be disappointed with the overall performance. Some of the specs you really can't afford to skimp on is a hard drive. Anything less than 10 gigabytes you might run into problems. Preferably a newer, later model video card, maybe within the last 5 or 6 years, or onboard video. An older model video card will work, however the performance will suffer. You will need a DVD-ROM to install this Linux Mint 11 32-bit DVD version. First thing you want to do to your computer before we get started with the install is to make sure that you back up all your data, whether it be to a thumb drive or a hard drive. This is most crucial because once we start the install, it's going to wipe out all your data and never to be recovered again. Now keep your peripherals connected to the computer. In most cases, during the install, all your peripherals will be configured automatically. Before turning off your computer, place the DVD Linux Mint installation disk in the tray. Now turn off your computer and then turn the computer on. As the computer boots, hopefully you'll see text on the screen regarding Linux, and then you'll know that the DVD-ROM is booting up. However, if this is not the case and you'll start seeing Windows or something that's not booting up the DVD-ROM, what you'll need to do is restart the computer, hit F12 repeatedly, and this would be in the case of Dells, Lenovo's, and other computers, and it would give you a menu option on what item you want to boot up, whether it be the hard drive or DVD-ROM, and you would choose the DVD-ROM. And after that, it should then start booting up the Linux Mint DVD showing this Linux text on the screen. If the DVD is still not booting up, third option is that you'll need to go to the BIOS, which is usually hitting the delete key or the F2 key as the computer is starting up. Once you're in the BIOS screen, you want to go to the menu where it gives you a choice to change the boot order. What you want to change it to is making the DVD the first boot option, and once you have that, you want to exit and click Save and restart your computer, and that should start your DVD-ROM to boot. Now that the DVD is booted up, you'll be confronted with the menu, Welcome to the Linux Mint 11 32-bit. What you want to do now is click on the Start Linux Mint on the top, and that'll start the installation process. Now that you started the boot up process, you'll see some text on the screen, and then after a few minutes you'll see the main desktop of Linux Mint 11. Once you're at the main desktop, you can then try Linux Mint in the live CD mode. In the live CD mode, you can now try out the various programs that were installed by default. Go to the menu button, click on, for example, Firefox or LibreOffice or Barasso CD burning software, and you can see how all those work, look, and feel on your computer. You can also bring up Firefox, and you should be able to connect to the internet and see how that works for you. While you are running all the programs off the live CD, you will notice everything is slower because it is running off the DVD drive instead of the hard drive. Once you install the Linux Mint operating system on the hard drive, you'll notice everything runs much faster. Now, to start the Linux installation on your hard drive, click on the Install Linux Mint icon on your desktop. The next screen will display is the Welcome Install screen. This is where you pick your language. By default it is English, and also there's a line there that says you may wish to read the release notes, which will tell you a little bit about this version of Linux Mint. Now click on the forward button. The next screen is preparing to install Linux Mint. A series of 3 check marks representing whether you have enough hard disk space and that it's plugged into power and you're connected to the internet. If one of these items are not met, you'll see an X instead of a check mark. But once you have these all met, just click on the forward button. The next screen is allocate a drive space. This represents how much of your hard drive is going to be used for Linux Mint. Now, by default, if you have a hard drive that has already Windows on it, it'll ask you if you want to put the Linux Mint version side by side with Windows. However, if there's no operating system on it, it'll just say by default erase disk and install Linux Mint, which is usually the option of choice. However, sometimes you may want to do something different, and again, you can see there's something where it says something else, and this is where you can partition the disk manually. You'll have to look that over, but in general, if you're doing a fresh install and not concerned about what's on the disk, just hit erase disk and install Linux Mint, and then click forward. Next step is erase disk and install Linux Mint. This shows you a visual representation of your hard drive and how it would be partitioned, but if it's one big hard drive, well, you just see as one. Again, next step, once you commit to this and click install now, will erase your hard drive and format it and install Linux Mint. So at this point there's no turning back, and whatever's on your hard drive will be wiped out. Next screen is where are you, which is basically a representation of the time zone that you're in. So by default it is New York, but if you put it in a different city anywhere in the world, it'll fix the time clock once you're done with the install and put it in for the correct time zone. Click forward. Next screen is the keyboard layout. By default it is the USA keyboard type. I guess if you're in another country it could vary, but I've never changed this and just went with the default. Next thing you can do is click forward. The next screen is who are you? And this is basically where you put in your name, put in your full name, the first line, and the second line will generally fill in by itself. It'll pick your first name and put in the name of your brand of your computer, and it's just basically again your computer name. You can change that if you want, and by default I think it then puts in your first name where it says pick a user. Again, you could change that if you want, and the next 2 blanks you need to put in a password, and it'll let you know if it's weak or not, but it doesn't matter what you use, and again you got to confirm your password and put it in a second time. And by default I leave the 3 check boxes the way they are. The one in the center, require my password to log in, that's what I usually have checked, but you could change it to log in automatically and not requiring a password each time you start the computer. But again, I leave this the same the way it is by default. And lastly, the one is encrypt my home folder. That's basically encrypting your data, and I don't use it, and I've heard there's been problems with it, so I just leave that by default the way things are. The next screen is Welcome to Linux Mint. And basically what's going on here is all your files are being copied from your DVD-ROM onto your hard drive, and all the system files, and probably take about 10-15 minutes. But during that time you'll be shown various screenshots about Linux Mint and its capabilities, its various programs, and what Linux Mint can do for you. And again, this will be about 10-15 minutes. Once the installation is complete, you'll see the installation complete window. You can continue to use the live CD and test out the live CD in this environment. But now that the installation is complete, you can hit restart now, and basically the computer will now start to shut down, and at some point it's going to pop out the DVD and ask you to remove it, and click enter, and once you do that, the computer will restart and your installation is complete of Linux Mint.